Pests can wreak havoc on your apple and your pear crop. I'll show you how to control those pests and to thin for better production. Thinning has plenty of benefits. By thinning, you stop the biannual bearing that trees sometimes have. Biannual bearing is just when they produce really heavy one year and not so much the next. Thinning will help balance out the tree's production from year to year. You also have less of a chance of branch breakage due to heavy fruit loads. Thinning helps reduce the risk of codling moth damage. The codling moth larvae will find its home right in the middle of a cluster of apples and pierce the skin. If we thin those apples, then it doesn't have a place to hide and we have less chance of damaging those apples. Thinning apples should be done within 30 to 40 days after the petals drop. And the fruit should be no more than 1 inch in size. Pears and apples will bloom in clusters. And with the apples, that center bloom is known as the apple king. And that's because that's the biggest flower and generally produces the biggest fruit. With apples, you'll want to remove all but that blossom king apple, unless it's marred. Then we go for the next biggest one, or the one that has the biggest, sturdiest stem, because these are the ones that are going to last a long time and they'll produce the biggest apple in the long run. With pears, we want to remove all but 2 of the pears, and we want to pick the most robust, unmarred, and the sturdiest stems. Here in our area, the codling moth shows up early, so spraying early is essential. The codling moth has 2 types of damage that can happen to your apples and pears. The first one is known as a sting. This is when they burrow in just to the surface of the apple. It doesn't damage it too much. It makes it more unsightly than anything, and then it dies, or it'll move on to the next one and then die. The second is when the larvae burrows deep into the apples and pears, creating a bigger hole, and a lot of times it goes all the way to the core. And oftentimes you'll see frass on the outside of the apple or the pear. And frass, it's just insect poop. By thinning your pears and apples, that can really help reduce on the codling moth sting. But we really need to spray to reduce any other problems. You'll want to wait until all of the petals have dropped before we have any type of spraying going on, because if we have petals, we have bee activity. So we want to wait until all of those petals have dropped, and then when they're gone, then it's time to spray. Any type of spray that I use is organic, but even though it's organic, if I see any bee activity or beneficial insects, I don't spray. I always spray in the evening time. This just lessens the chance of any bee activity that could be around those fruit trees as well. I use spinosad for my pears and my apple trees. It's a bacterium and it works really good against the apple maggot and the codling moth. I'll spray early, definitely after petal drop, and I'll spray about once a month thereafter, because pears and apples really have problems with the codling moth, and then a little bit later the apple maggot, and this just keeps them in check. When you spray your fruit, don't forget to spray the entire surface of it. Do the leaves and the branches as well. And tank sprayers or pump-up sprayers are really helpful so that you get the job done a lot quicker, because you're going to be spraying once a month. Another pest is a woolly apple aphid, and it's a real nuisance, and it usually comes in about early summer. It'll feed on the limbs and the roots, causing gall-like swollen formations. It's a real nuisance, and the spinosad doesn't take care of it. And so what I found that works really good is a horticultural oil. But when you spray a horticultural oil, you really don't want to spray when the temperatures are above 95 degrees. If you're doing your regular spray with your spinosad and you have your woolly aphid problem, you can actually mix the products. Just make sure that you read your application labels and don't put more than what it says. Our pears and apples require more spraying than any of our fruit trees here in our climate. So I make sure that I put it on my calendar to spray them once a month, and it really only takes a few minutes so that I have nice fruit at the end of the season. No wormy pears or apples means longer storage and no cutting out any damage. Enjoy the harvest, and I'll see you in our next episode.